This irrigation system has been such a lifesaver since we set it up, but oh my god, setting it up has been a learning experience to say the least. These tips, I promise you, they will be very helpful in setting up your own irrigation system to provide water to your garden. Hey guys, and welcome back to Mini Urban Farm, a channel about urban gardening and homesteading in the suburbs. Today I'm going to be walking you through my irrigation setup, how I set it up, the parts that you need to set it up similar to the way I've done it, and walking you through some of my mistakes and some of the things that I wish I would have done a little bit differently, lessons learned, all of that good stuff. Let's go. Okay, so of course our irrigation system starts at our spigot, right? Our faucet coming out of the house. So over here on the left, that's our irrigation system, and that gets connected to all of the other boxes, as you can see. And then on the right hand side here, this line connects directly to our water hose. Now the water hose is how I was manually watering our plants before, but since we have the irrigation system, I am no longer having to do that. Now the water hose gets used for starting seeds inside and transferring water into one of our 5-gallon buckets to water other plants on the other side. Okay, so here is our setup for the irrigation system. You can see this is the spigot that we have. This metal part here comes with the spigot in our house. It is a backflow preventer. Now the kit that I bought, and I will link the exact kit in the description bar, it came with a backflow preventer, and we originally had it set up as well, but then we realized that this was actually the same thing, so we removed it. So we have the backflow preventer on the spigot. If you have like this metal piece here that you can't remove, that's probably what it is. We learned that after several tries of figuring that out. And then after that, we have a splitter over here. Now this is just a plastic splitter. I think it was like $3 or $4 at Home Depot, but you can actually turn individual lines on and off. So right now the hose is off, but I can turn it back on. I don't know if you heard that, but I'm hearing it kind of like fill up and then back off when need be. After that, we have the timer, right? It's not actually rainbow colored, it's just the glare of the screen. So we have our timer. I really actually like this timer because it has like the clock settings, right, for multiple days and multiple times. You can cancel the watering, which I've had to do several times, and then you can water on demand as well, even if it's not on the schedule. So you can see currently there's 5 hours about until the next watering, and that is because I pressed the cancel water button because this morning it has been pouring rain. I will leave the link to this in the description as well, but I like this one. It's a little bit more expensive than what I was planning on spending on a timer, but it has been well worth it. So after that, we have the PSI regulator, and it is at 25 PSI, right? That is the standard one for drip irrigation. And then after that, there is this little connector thing that brings it down so that it can connect to the 1/2-inch tubing, right? Because this is not the same size as the tubing, so you needed the little connector to reduce it down. Oh, and one thing that I did forget to mention was that in here, in the backflow preventer, it also has a little mesh. Now, the one that I have, the kit that I have, did come with that mesh and the backflow preventer together, but we discovered that this had it in there as well, so we just didn't add those pieces in. Now, if you don't have this piece added into your faucet already, for outside as a backflow preventer and a mesh screen, then you would have to add it in to this little setup in here. All right, so now this line here, this is 1/2-inch tubing. It connects into every single one of our boxes. So as you can see here, it connects there. There's a splitter. It comes up and then continues on. There's a splitter there and then continues on and so and so forth. It basically forms a giant U all around, and then it ends in that box over here. And as you can see, there's that little, that's the stopping point. There's like a little cap on here to shut off that end so it doesn't come out. Okay, so this is that same line that just came out of the faucet. It is connected in here with one of these little connectors. That is this. So one of the lines, oh, there you go, now it focused. All right, so it's connected here. This line shoots up this is coming out of here, and then that just continues on in that line. It's not really difficult to put it together. It just requires that you get that that tubing over this piece here and snugly in place. So it really doesn't come out. These aren't that expensive. None of this was actually super expensive, and actually I will tell you the exact cost of the entire irrigation system at the end of the video. All right, so as you can see, we have more 1/2-inch tubing coming up through here, about 2 feet or so. This is just one of these little one of these little guys that has been held in place so that it doesn't kind of move around everywhere. You just kind of screw them in place. So that's as simple as that. And then we have an elbow in here, another tiny little piece of tubing, and you can see like this is where the ridge was, and you just kind of fit it over this part, and so it stays in place. Another little piece of tubing, and then again another elbow, and in here it is capped off, and these are just stakes to hold it in place. And then we have a connector in here which actually leads to our little sprinkler system. And this is actually one of the things that we put in after we put in the drip lines. So this has like the little on and off switch. You can turn it on and off depending on, and actually you can kind of regulate as well the flow of water that comes out of here. And you can, if it would focus here, there we go. And you can see it has like a little 360 head that just shoots water all around. Now the reason that I added in this little sprinkler system is because after we put in our drip lines, which are over here, you can see that the drip lines are only providing water, and sorry about that, that was kind of the stuff I was using to show you guys. It's only providing water to like the roots of the plants underneath, right? Because they're drip lines, they drip into the plants. Now in this section, in pretty much every single one of the boxes, I planted seeds, right? I just kind of like direct sowed seeds before we left, because I knew that we're gonna have some of these, so I just tested it out. Now this is kale growing, and you can see that it is growing really, really well. So that means that this little guy worked very, very well because I did not water them at all. So I just wanted to test it out and make sure before I actually direct sow the rest of my seeds that we had water in this little part of the box, and the drip lines actually are going to be providing water to the in-ground seedlings that I plant in there. So this is definitely something that you should think about before installing your irrigation system, whether it's drip irrigation or sprinklers or whatever it is. Different types of seeds and plants will have different watering requirements. So for example, I plant out a lot of tomatoes. Tomatoes are great because they have a really deep root system, so drip irrigation works perfectly with that. You put one of the emitters right next to each of the tomato plants. The drip irrigation provides water in that specific spot, and ultimately what happens is if you have a really good growing medium, the soil in your raised box or in the ground or whatever it is, the water will spread out slowly, right? It'll start here in one little drip, and then it'll expand and provide water to pretty much everything around it, right? In a perfect world. Now that is a problem when it comes to starting seeds, right? I like to direct sow a lot of seeds, and a lot of the seeds that I direct sow are very, very small. For example, this kale, the arugula, carrot seeds, parsley seeds, a lot of those things are very small, and so I tend to not cover them with soil, and if I do cover them, it's very, very, very lightly. So what happens with drip irrigation is that the soil is getting watered underneath, right? It goes down with the drip irrigation, it goes down and it spreads around. But that top layer of soil where all of your seeds are, they're not getting watered. That is a problem with drip irrigation. So what you end up having to do, like I did in this situation, and I really wish that I would have researched this ahead of time, was I installed these little sprinkler system in each of the box. The middle part of the box has a sprinkler system that I've kind of configured it to radiate about 2 feet on either side, which is just enough to get the middle part of the box, which coincidentally is where I plant out my direct sown seeds for the most part. Sometimes I plant beans, right? Like in this box here, the sides are empty, and I plant out bean seeds, and they will get watered because I can adjust the sprinkler to provide water to the sides of the box as well. Or you can plant out, seeds and then have a sprinkler wherever it is that you need it. But I plant out the majority of my direct sown seeds in the middle of the box, so I put those sprinklers in the middle of the box, and the drip irrigation on the ends where I usually put my more established plants. Okay, so back to this drip irrigation. You can see I have a stake in here just kind of keeping it in place. It's just a metal stake. It's like a little U, horseshoe shaped, and it just kind of goes into the ground and holds it more or less in place. You can do this where it's attached to the back of the box and have it come through. You can have this part on the end of the box and have your lines run all the way down. That is just not the way that I decided to do it. For whatever reason, we decided to go with this configuration. Now this drip line, right, these are emitters in here, right? This is a 1/4 inch tubing which has emitters here, and you can see that's the little emitter, that's the hole where the water comes out of, and you can see this is kind of like raised and it kind of just drops off right here. This little part is the emitter. This is the other emitter, and then there's an end cap or plug or whatever you want to call it. And so we just took that, and at the end of it, you plug it in place. Now you can see one over here and then one on the other end over there to the left. Now these are 6 inches in between. You can buy this with 12-inch spacing emitters. You can buy just the line itself with no emitters on it. And I will tell you one of my mistakes right after this that I did. But you can buy just a line with no emitters on it and connect your own emitters in whatever spacing you want. I decided to go with the 6 inches emitters because I plant pretty densely in all of these raised beds here. Okay, so now it's probably a great time to tell you that that perfectly spaced 6-inch emitter drip line, 1/4-inch tubing is not the first thing that we decided to use. It was not the first thing that we put in this irrigation setup. It is actually something that we discovered after we made a very large mistake. So the very first thing that we put in there was this 1/4-inch drip line. Now, if you look closely, this 1/4-inch drip line, right, it's completely black. And there are no emitters on this at all, right? The entire line is just completely emitterless. Now, I was in the hardware store. We were in the hardware store, and we don't know anything about this, right? Like, we don't know about irrigation. Neither one of us, myself or Alan, has really ever set up drip lines, irrigation, any of that. But we decided it was going to be a great idea before we went on vacation to make sure that our plants, my plants, were getting watered, and I didn't have to worry about asking somebody to come water them on vacation, which I will tell you that was another mistake, which we will get to later. But for right now, we were in the hardware store and we saw this, and then we saw this, right, which is what's currently in the boxes. Now this is the 1/4-inch line, and you can see it has all of the little emitters in it. All right, so this was about 3 times the price of this. And so of course, myself and Alan, being very frugal people by nature, we decided that instead of buying, right, this one, which has the emitters, which we didn't know at the time were emitters, right, it said it came with little holes, all right, the little holes already pre-cut in it for you, we were going to buy this, all right, which was about 3 times cheaper, and we were going to buy one of these little things, right, because that was advertised right underneath. Alright, and if you've never seen this, basically you take this part and you poke little holes in the 1/4-inch tubing or in the 1/2-inch tubing or whatever it is, and it allows you to put in some connectors, right? That is what this is for, to make holes for connectors, not to poke holes in 1/4-inch tubing and allow water to flow out of the 1/4-inch tubing and into your raised beds or your garden or whatever it is. Now, that is not what we understood. We saw this, and then we saw this, and then we saw this. And we thought that this was just tubing that had holes poked into it. So we figured, okay, well, we're frugal people. We're gonna take this and we're going to poke our own holes in it. And that was such a bad idea because that is not what this tubing is. This tubing has pre-inserted emitters every 6 inches, right, that regulate the flow of water. Now, I can tell you now from experience that what happens if you take this tubing, right, without any emitters and you poke holes into it every 6 inches, right, because we're very diligent about poking holes every 6 inches, which, yes, was very, very time consuming and such a pain in the behind, but we did it. If you do that, if you poke holes in this, what ends up happening is all the holes are different sizes, right? Because you poke them at different pressures, and so all the holes are different sizes. They spew out water in very different amounts in each box, in each of our boxes, or in, you know, wherever you have your tubing set. So the first box got a lot more water than the last box, and then when we started poking holes in the rest of them, the water flow changed, and there was just like streaks of water coming out. It was definitely not a drip irrigation system. It was like, imagine poking holes in a garden hose and then just letting it free-for-all run for I don't know how long. All right, that is what ended up happening. So this is not what you want to poke holes into. This is not what this is used for. So if you decide that you're going to go with the non-emitter tubing, you have to buy emitters, right? And you need one of these little pokey holey things to poke a hole in this, put a connector in, and then put an emitter wherever you need it along this line. You can definitely do that. Now, we want a drip system irrigation with emitters spaced evenly, so this ended up coming out of the boxes and being replaced with this that has the 6-inch 6-inch emitters, spaced perfectly evenly, and provides good regulation and pressure so that it actually ends up being a drip system. We decided to go with this, and then the little sprinkler heads in the middle to water the seeds that needed to be germinated. Alright, now moving on to our next box. You can see it is a very similar setup. We have the line coming up through here, we have the elbows into the box, and so on and so forth. And then you can see this one doesn't have, well, it does have basil growing around it, but it's pretty empty right now because the basil is still not growing very tall. This is the 1/4 inch tubing, the same as the black one I just showed you. This is a connector. We poked a hole in here, put the connector in. See if I can get a close up. So this is a connector that comes with this little kit. This is a stake in the ground. This is the 1/4 inch tubing, a connector to regulate the flow. I think it's like 10 psi, which you don't necessarily need, but it came with this. And for the sprinkler system, you need it to be regulated at a lower psi so it doesn't shoot out everywhere. And then this you buy separately, or at least we did. I think you can probably get it in a kit. And then the water comes on and it spews out everywhere. You can see this little thing turns, and so it kind of just regulates itself, and it waters pretty much the entire middle of the box. It does kind of get some of the ends sometime, but like I said, you can turn it off. Wait, there's something on me. You can turn it on and off right here. And then of course it is split to the next box and the next box and the next box, just the same way. And you can see at the very end there's that long one going through, so I'll take you over there and show you. So this is our biggest box, and it is where our zucchinis are planted. You can see some of our little flowers coming out already. They were actually really pretty this morning. They were open until it started to pour rain. As you can see, the soil is pretty wet here, and we do have quite a few weeds and things like that, although I think that's probably a carrot popping up from last year. So you can see that we have only drip emitters, right? So we have 4 plants. There's an emitter there, there's an emitter next to it, right there, and right there at the base of our zucchini plants. We opted to not put in any sprinklers in here because really the only thing that's going in here is our zucchini. And then I did mention, I think on another video, I will be planting out some thyme in here to provide kind of like a ground cover, but thyme does not need a lot of water, so it's probably fine. I will just leave it like this without any sprinklers and just the emitter system for the base of our zucchini plants. And then of course the same thing all around the rest of the garden. You can see that line goes through the whole garden, and then the same thing, it connects to the rest of the boxes via that one line, and you can see the tubing coming into every single one of our raised beds. Alright, so currently I am running my drip system, and when I say the drip system, I mean the whole irrigation system, the drip and the little sprinklers in each box. I'm running them for about 20 minutes, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Now it is getting really hot here on the days where it's not raining. On the days where it is raining, I just turn it off completely, but it gets scorching hot. It's already into the 80s and 90s here, and we are at the very beginning of spring, right? We're at the end of March, beginning of April now. And so I have had to play with this a lot. I run it once at 10 a.m., which is about the time that it starts to dry out the soil here, right? So it's not like midday yet where it's going to get really evaporated by the sun, but it's when the plants are really starting to see a lot of water loss inside the raised beds. And then I water again at about 5 o'clock after they're pretty much dried out, or at least the top level of soil is dried out, and I provide more water there. Now I've done it like that for about a week now. It seems to be working pretty well. I originally started watering about half an hour in the morning, early morning at 8 a.m. And then again at 7 p.m. I have had to adjust this several times in between. I've adjusted it down from half an hour to 20 minutes because the plants were getting a lot of water and ultimately being overwatered. So you will have to adjust this for your own system, depending on the type of plants you have, the number of emitters that you have, the amount of space in your garden that you have, all right, the pressure coming out of the faucet, everything. So you will need to adjust that depending on your own garden setup. But for right now, mine is set to 20 minutes twice a day, every single day. And it is starting to pour rain right now, so I am going to gather up all my stuff and I'm going to finish this video on the patio. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that were mistakes on my part, but hopefully will help you to not make these mistakes. Number one being, of course, the 1/4-inch tubing line with emitters. You want emitters if you're doing a drip system, either built into the line or ones that you connect specifically to that line with the little connectors, but don't make the same mistake I did. So moving on from that one, we set up this system. If I have to be honest with you guys, it was probably the night before we went out of town. Now, we started setting it up about 3 or 4 days before we went out of town and just had to troubleshoot. We found out, you know, the drip system when the whole thing started going spastic on us because we actually did not have emitters in our drip lines. That was mistake number one. We went back to Home Depot to get actual lines that had emitters built into them, and then we discovered that the seeds that I had planted out were not actually getting watered, like the ones that were direct sown on top of the soil, because the drip system just goes into the soil and not on top of all of the soil evenly. So we went back and we got more sprinklers, or we got sprinklers to install. We had a bunch of little hiccups, and then in between there we were kind of adjusting the amount of water it was getting, how long it was running for, how many times a day it was running for, all of that. So the best advice I can give you if you're going to set up a system is, number one, don't go out of town the day after, obviously. But we decided we didn't have anybody else to watch the garden, because it was kind of like last minute at this point, to watch the garden and to water it properly and to teach them how to do it. So we're gonna do that, and the plants did end up getting quite overwatered, which wasn't great, but I would prefer them being overwatered to not being watered enough when it's 90 degrees outside and then just frying up and dying, right? You can't really revive dead plants that are completely withered and dead, but you can fix plants that are overwatered. So our plants were slightly overwatered, and from there we just kind of adjusted, and you can see now everything is like bright green and doing perfectly fine. So that was definitely a mistake. Do not set up your system in a hurry. Make sure that if you are setting up an irrigation system, you have time to dedicate to getting it right. There will be troubleshooting. Even if you set up the perfect drip lines, the sprinklers, you research all the needs for your plants, you will have to troubleshoot the amount of water that they're getting, and that will continue through the entire season, because the season will warm up, it will cool down, there will be cooler nights, you know, hotter days, whatever the case is. I will have to adjust this continuing forward. I will adjust the amount of water that they're getting, the time of day, the length that they're getting the water, all of that, and I'll turn on the little knobby things on the sprinklers as well so that they get more water as they grow. All of that is going to be a factor moving forward and throughout every season with an irrigation system. But you need to be able to watch the initial setup, right, of the plants. When you put your seedlings in, when you germinate seeds on an irrigation setup, you need to be able to see and monitor what it's actually doing, because what you think it's going to look like is not how it's going to look like. So you need to be able to tell, you know, what it's actually doing and adjust accordingly. And if you don't have the time to do that, then your plants are going to end up dying in the worst scenario, or just being very overwatered if you go out of town, and that's what happened to us. So thankfully we overwatered instead of killing off everything. But if you don't have the time to set up an irrigation system, or if you're doing it right before you go out of town, maybe just wait and have somebody come water it. All right, so that leads me actually into our irrigation setup cost, right? How much did I spend on this system? Now, originally I spent $135 to set up this entire system, right? That is with the drip lines that did not have the emitters in it. Now, after all of those mistakes, right? The drip line, the sprinkler, replacing the drip line, all of those different little tweaks that we had to make, it cost me about $210, I think, was the overall cost, going back and forth and getting different pieces and replacing pieces. So it's still pretty doable. It wasn't like an extreme, you know, amount of money. And for the investment, right, it's a pretty good return on investment, because I am no longer having to water my system manually, water my garden manually every single day. I am having to come out here every morning pretty much and turn off the water with that like canceling water button, but basically that's just one button and then it's done for the whole day. And I let the afternoon ones run, because even though it was raining like most mornings here, it's still been really hot throughout the day. So I let those go in, and it seems to be doing fine for now. But Overall, it cost me about $210. If I didn't make those mistakes, it would have cost me about $150, $160 just for the replacement of those tubings, right? Because I would have had to not buy the 1/4-inch tubing without emitters and replace it in the cost with the 1/4-inch tubing with emitters, plus the sprinkler little 360 micro sprinkler heads. So that is the total cost for our system. It's definitely worth the investment. As far as I can tell, we've had the system set up for, I think, close to a month now almost, and it seems to be working out pretty well. The plants are happy. I mean, I have not done any watering in here, which makes me very happy because I was having to water several times a day, especially in summer season. And even here in Florida, it was getting very hot in fall and winter as well. So that's definitely a plus. It was well worth the cost in my opinion. If you are setting up a system, you know, just do your research before. What type of things are you going to be planting in your boxes? Are you planning on germinating seeds in the boxes directly or in ground, or wherever it is that you are, you know, putting this irrigation system? Are you planting seeds? Are you planting plants with very shallow roots? Are you planting plants with very deep roots? Another consideration is the size of your transplants really does matter when it comes to a drip irrigation system, because what happens is if your plants, right, if they're very small and they have a very small root system, right, the root system is just about here, as were some of my tomato plants, the drip irrigation system isn't necessarily getting to those roots, right? If you have a very large plant and the roots are spread out all over the place, then no matter where the drip irrigation system is penetrating, it spreads out a little bit and the roots are absorbing that water from all angles. But if the root system is not very large, then you're gonna have a problem getting that water to your plants. So if you couldn't tell by now, I am not an expert at this. I am doing this for the first time. It seems to have worked pretty well, actually, surprisingly enough. Even through all the mistakes, the garden is pretty forgiving at this point. And hopefully you got something out of this video to prevent making some big mistakes yourself in setting up your irrigation system and just learning how to overall do it. You know, it was quite scary for me to have to set it up, you know, because I know that there's like different configurations and plumbing and all of this other stuff that I had never heard of before. But really when it came down to it, it was not as difficult as I had built it up to be in my head. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, please like and subscribe for more gardening, urban homesteading, chicken videos, all of that good stuff. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.